Thank you, Luis. Good afternoon. Bear with me. We're almost there. I'm not going to say anything surprising. I hope nothing that I say will come as a surprise to you, because basically I'm going to sum up all the good input, all the good ideas, or almost all the good ideas that have come up already this morning from our speakers on policy, Simone, Piero, Kristen, but also what Miha said, what Anne said, what Christoph said. Take this as a bit of a handbook where you can find a lot of, we hope, good ideas that you, as policymakers, if there are any left in the room, can take home when you're thinking what to do for the publishing sector, and everyone else in the publishing sector can use to ask for something to policymakers. The conceptual framework we used is quite simple. We looked at the demand side and the supply side. So on one hand, what you do on the side of readers, on the other hand, what you do on the side of the publishers. And then we looked at the practical side, funding, so what you can do when you put the money on the table, but also, very importantly, regulation, so when you legislate. Funding from the demand side, what do we recommend? And by the way, to give it even a more practical angle, every suggestion is rated according to F for feasibility, how easy we think you can do that, and I for impact, how much of, well, an impact, an effect it can have. First of all, support for demand. We heard it, book vouchers. That is, we think, very simple. Once you decide to put the money on the table, it doesn't take much. You choose. You give it to 18-year-olds. You give it to low-income families to buy books. You give it to all families to buy textbooks, whatever. Easy done, very high impact. Help libraries buy books. Immediate effect, beneficial for the entire value chain. Targeted literacy and reading promotion. We've heard it a million times. Reading promotion is fundamental, but it has to be targeted. Christoph gave us a very good conceptual framework for that. You can't just say, let's promote reading in Europe. That just remains on the paper. Look at what kind of reading, look at what kind of people, look at the geography, look at the population, at the demography. Target your campaign, and then you can get somewhere. So not as easy, but still, if done properly, immensely impactful. By the way, the ranking is 1 to 4, because we didn't want to have a middle ground where, yeah, everything is 3. No. It's either easy, very easy, 4, easy, 3, not easy, 2, not at all easy, 1. No middle ground. Thinking bigger, thinking broader. Invest in education, socioeconomic welfare, the Sustainable Development Goals, you name it. Even more difficult, but as important for a society where books have an important place and then where publishing can thrive. Moving to the supply side, supporting innovation. Again, pretty obvious, but it has to be neutral. It has to be infrastructural, good for everyone. And both literally and metaphorically, think more software than hardware. Books are more software than hardware, even print books. Relatively easy, if you put your mind to it. Definitely, again, very impactful. More or less everything we propose has high impact, otherwise we wouldn't propose it, of course. So there's a selection bias. Support stakeholders in key positions, which means support networks. Make sure you match the funding with the people who need it. In many places, in many cases, it's not even a matter of not having enough money, but that money must find the people who actually can put that to work. Use multipliers. Project-based funding is still too complicated for many small entities. Find intermediaries who can handle the funds and then help who actually needs that funds. Incubators, accelerators. Again, a bit more difficult, but very, very impactful. And then regulation. Regulation, there the distinction between supply and demand side is a bit more blurry, so I'm going to talk about regulation tout court. It can apply to both. And I'm going to start by going back to basics. There's no shame in saying that we need solid copyright and freedom to publish, also in education, as Kristen very well underlined, as a prerequisite. There shouldn't even be a discussion. The problem is that we still have to say that again and again to policymakers. Don't be afraid to use the word copyright. Don't be afraid to use the word freedom to publish when talking about books. A lot of people think that copyright is an obstacle to freedom of expression, that freedom to publish is not exactly what we need. No, don't be afraid. Say it time and again. That is the basis, which is why, despite being obvious for us, it's not that easy, but again, it's fundamental. Even more difficult, a competition policy that really favors pluralism. Again, we've heard it. We need to reform antitrust. We can't allow big players to become bigger and bigger and bigger just by buying whatever interests or bothers them. We need a definition of market that takes into account that some players are not in the market, they are the market. Then how do you define the market when the player is the whole market? So a competition that really maintains the pluralism that has always been a characteristic of the publishing industry. Very difficult, but absolutely necessary. And a few, to conclude, framework conditions that work across the board. Keep it clear, if not simple. Oversimplification is also a danger, but at least keep your stakeholders informed and engaged when you make policy or when you build funding programs. Survey and measure. Miha, among others, stressed the importance. Survey and measure. You want to know the impact of a policy or of a funding program, measure it. It's the only way for escaping the theoretical framework. The only way of knowing what happens is if you measure afterwards. As Piero put it, take a holistic approach, extremely difficult and extremely impactful. So if in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, when you help the needy, do not let your left hand know what the right hand is doing. I said, forget about that. Let the left hand know what the right hand is doing. Let your left foot, let your right foot, let your head. Everyone has to know. The whole system must be coordinated. Otherwise, you end up with conflicting policies and you get nowhere. And finally, again, taking from Piero, let the data flow. Also not easy. Also quite impactful, which means break down the data monopolies. Let the data flow across the value chain. So I think all of this you can put in a small handbook of 10, 12 pages if you print it very big for everyone to read. And I hope that we can all take at least a few of those things home and try to hammer them into the heads of the policymakers. Thank you very much.